Why? That's the whole thing that I've always been puzzled with till this day is why? Like, why have I never been invited back?
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I'm your host, Mike Doyle. Before we begin, huge favor, go give a review. Just stop what you're doing, hit pause, give a review on whatever app. I ask this at the end of every intro, and it's always just kind of brushed over, but now I'm actually specifically asking for one. So just if you're listening to this thing for a long time, and you want to help out, go do that because it helps get this thing more reach, and the more reach I get, the more powerful I become, and I will remember all of you when I'm at the top counting all of my spoils. No, but seriously, go give a review. That'd be fucking great if you could do that. Jordan Burns played drums in Strung Out until 2018. He was part of the OG group that formed Pulley and played with them until 2000. He's been featured in Drum and Modern Drummer magazine. He owns a long-time running motocross company called Moto XXX and has been featured in Racer X, Dirt Rider, Motocross Action, Freerider, Cycle News, etc. Jordan's name has come up a lot in interviews, and he reached out after listening to the Scott interview in Pulley and said, I've got my side of it or some stories I want to tell. And I was like, dude, you should definitely come on here. And he said, sure. And if you haven't heard that interview, it's with Scott Radinsky. He talks about 10-foot pole and Pulley. And then if you kind of follow the breadcrumbs, go backwards, it gets Dennis Jaggard, who talks about 10-foot pole. Then the other connection that Jordan has was he was in Strung Out, and so I talked to Jake Kiley. He's another interview. And then I talked to Wendy Cherry, who talks about Jim Cherry, who was in Strung Out and in Pulley. So there's this whole little world that's been created here, and you kind of get these different aspects. And they're all really good interviews, so you can kind of go backwards and listen to them after this one, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. I think they're all very good, and a lot of people like them, so you might want to check them out. So we got Jordan on the Skype, and this is what we chat about. Moto XXX, learning how to play the kick with his left foot, the intensity of the LA scene, what he thought of Strung Out when he first saw them play, Propaghandi, his relationship with Jim Cherry, Twisted by Design, the formation of Pulley, what led him to leaving Pulley, which band did he like being in more, and a ton more. Lastly, if you want to support the podcast, just go to patreon.com/thiswasthescene. It's $1 a month. I also have a $3 tier, which has past episodes that are not on podcast apps anymore uploaded to there. If you download the Patreon app to your phone, you can listen to them like a player. So you don't have to keep your phone on to hear all the episodes, which is nice. And it also helps support the podcast. So if you can go do that, that'd be fucking fantastic. And yeah, that's all I got to say. So feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. You had messaged me because I guess you had heard the Scott interview. And did you hear that in the Dennis one or just the Scott one?
I think I've heard both.
How'd you find the interviews?
I don't know. Maybe just links on seeing it on Instagram or Facebook. I don't really fully recall. Or somebody telling me or something.
You started with, you listened to the podcast and you wanted to kind of give your talk about Scared Straight, 10-foot pole, and Pulley, so we can kind of get into that. Yeah, but before all that stuff, real quick, so how do I say it? Is it Moto XXX or Moto XXX?
Moto XXX.
So what is that? I can't I see you posting about it, and so just kind of give yourself a plug. What is that?
Moto XXX is my brand. It's a motocross company, obviously. Me and Smelly, Eric Sandin, started it together back in I don't know, first conception of it was 94, and it started out with a video that we made. We got my friend Kurt Haller involved, who basically was already making snowboard videos. And we wanted to make a video that was more like, the surf and skate videos and snowboard videos that were happening at the time. And there was nothing in the motocross scene yet like it, a good punk rock vibe type video. So we spent 2 years on it. We put our first video out, and it was basically one of the first 2 or 3 of its kind to come out. So it kind of broke new grounds into a new scene, and we basically exposed all these different motocrossers to the punk rock scene through our soundtrack, because we were, of course, tight with all the bands. Obviously using both of our bands, Strung Out No Effects, and bringing in bands say 59 Times the Pain from Sweden, using Lagwagon and Melancholy, No Use for Name, Blunt, Good Riddance, and Wizzo from Germany, and Skin of Tears. I'm crediting myself with a good memory right there for our first soundtrack of the music, but we put this video out and we just sold a shit ton of videos, and it was a new scene. And from there, we sold a shit ton of videos. We started a race team with Brian Deegan, who's very famous now. He went on to do Metal Militia and all that, but we started a team with Brian Deegan and Brian Swank, who was a two-time 125 Supercross champion. And we just took all of our money and reinvested it back into the sport with making this team. And the first year we did our team, we won a 125 Supercross with Brian Deegan. We were just this little punk rock team that was competing against all the factory teams. We won in 1997, and that's when Brian Deegan did the famous or infamous ghost ride. He ghost rode his bike across the finish line, and it became one of the most famous things in Supercross that's still remembered today. So from there, we continued to make videos, and the videos would support all the money it took to fund the team, and we would grow with sponsors. Actually, Fat Records and Epitaph and Nitro Records were early sponsors of ours, and we would throw out of course, you knew all the early compilations like Fat Music for Fat People and all those type of things, and we would throw those out at our pits. So every weekend we were getting in trouble, at the races and stuff. But we had a whole punk rock vibe to it. Yeah, that went on for years. The team grew and grew and grew. We had all sorts of famous riders riding for the team, and long story short, it went dormant for a while. Lots of different changes or whatever, and super long story short, I have the brand back to myself. That's what I've been doing lately, is dealing with Moto XXX stuff.
Do you ride?
I ride all the time. That's my sport, motocross. Smelly, he rides too, but and he's been out of the whole Moto XXX thing for a long time, and he's obviously onto his whole, he's doing the surfboard thing and pickle sticks. He hasn't been riding at all with their touring schedule, but after their last shows, which are coming up in October, I think he'll finally start riding some dirt bikes again. He just hasn't wanted to get injured. And, I've definitely had my share of injuries, and it's had some effect on the band in the past on a couple different scenarios. With the biggest one was breaking my foot, and a week before we were going to go on tour, which is, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago at this point. We were going to get a fill-in drummer. We practiced at my house. I was getting really frustrated with this drummer that we had filling in. I was just getting pissed, and I had my roadie set my drums up left-footed because I broke my right foot. I just started practicing my ass off left foot, and long story short on that one, I ended up telling everyone that I'm going on tour and I'm doing the whole thing left-footed. It was definitely a challenge, but we pulled it off. I was on crutches the whole time and managed to pull that one off. So,
who was that tour with?
Oh shit, who did we take out? I don't remember. It was a headlining tour for us.
As I say, like that would have been 20 years ago. It would have been like 2004.
Yeah, it's hard to remember, exact time frame or whatever, and then of course hard to remember what bands. I don't remember.
How the hell did you play with your left foot with that fast kick pedal?
It was a process of learning and practicing, and I didn't have much time to figure it out. But I had already been playing double kick pedal. Like I said, we practiced in our studio at that time was in my backyard. I have a little separate unit back there. Yeah, I just got set up. I propped my right foot up on a pillow to keep it a little bit elevated, and I just started practicing, really going for it with my left foot and learning the beats. So yeah, there were times if I recall, where I was playing, where it felt like someone was hitting my leg with a hammer. You had to really warm up a lot and get your leg used to it and get it into the swing of things. But I ended up pulling it off. It was definitely a challenge. It ended up working out because, my upper body was able to perform everything properly, which gave it the proper strung out sound, I guess, instead of having the fill-in drummer wasn't really matching what I was doing. Maybe getting through it, but not giving it the strung out sound, I guess.
Did you find like moving on that actually helps not improve your drum, but like advance your drumming skills at all?
Back then, I think so. Yeah, I do think so. Back then, it got that left foot. It brought a lot more independence to my left foot. It really built up, the muscles in my leg and stuff. Yeah, it was pretty rewarding to pull that off. Like coming up on stage every night on crutches, having to get help, get everything set up properly, where my kick drum was set up to the left, right, instead of being in the right in front of me. There was a hole there. So that's where my right foot just would rest. The kick drum was on the left, and yeah, it was pretty badass to pull that off. I'd say it's a proud moment in time.
Yeah, because the songs are like fucking nuclear fast, so that's pretty wild.
Could I do that today? Fuck no. Would I want to do that today? No.
You should test yourself in the next couple of weeks, see if you can do it.
I'll give you the report.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so start off, like, how did you get involved in the punk scene?
Well, it was, I'm trying to think, like, I started drumming and then finding different music and stuff. Basically, when I started drumming, I got into a little punk band right off the bat. Punk rock was just starting to happen. The guys from Bad Religion went to my high school. Fishbone went to my high school. And I was just fully getting into drumming and, I don't know, discovering some different bands. I remember, I think maybe one of the first bands that I discovered was Devo. I thought it was all punk rock and stuff. And I remember I had a custom Devo shirt made with some stripes on it and cut off and stuff. And I wore it to school. And at our school, all the punk rockers hung out in a little certain section and stuff. And I remember showing up with my Devo shirt on and everyone started calling me a poser. And I'm like, what? That's not fucking punk rock. That shit's new wave. So you start learning new wave. What? I remember going to our local record store here, Moby Disc, shopping for records, where I discovered after I had bought Freedom of Choice, and then the next records I went to go and buy were the Germs, GI, and X Los Angeles. I don't know, I think I have recollection of bringing that home and putting the Germs on in my bedroom and just losing my mind. It was probably slam dancing in my bedroom by myself, just freaking out on it. I'd say that was the early discovery of punk rock, and then playing in my early punk bands. I had a very first band when I was 15 called Society's Prisoners. Yeah, it's just all kind of started from there, and playing backyard parties and eventually moving to gigs and stuff.
Was drumming always the thing you wanted to do?
Yeah, I played guitar when I was younger. I never became, per se, a guitarist because I think I took a break, if I recall. Took a break from guitar for maybe 2 years or something like that till I discovered drums. From what I remember, I discovered drums at my junior high school, for a band. They had a drum set set up there, and I think the first time I ever sat down at a drum set, I could play a beat. That was where that all started from, and then I told my parents I wanted to get a drum set. They kind of weren't having it because they weren't sure it would be something I would continue. So I think I had to rent a drum set for 3 or 4 months until I could convince my parents, this is what I want to do and we need to buy a drum set.
How old were you when you did that?
15.
So what kind of like I mean at that point like what were you playing? Like what bands were you just listening to, like Germs and things like that and copying what they were playing or who were you listening to?
No, I mean, are you talking like what was influencing me? I mean, I was definitely getting influenced by early drummers that I was discovering in punk bands like, say, like The Adolescents, Social Distortion, Bad Religion. The list goes on, I guess. And of course, you do the stuff where you're playing with the headphones, but at the same time, I was definitely listening to a lot of metal and metal drummers. So you would try and pick from different things to learn and to try and create things into your own vibe. You know, Neil Peart from Rush was definitely my number one influence, absolutely by far. And then you would take all these different drummers and try and combine like different things, and you try and develop your own style out of the things that you're learning.
What was like the most difficult part about playing drums that took you the longest to get used to?
Hmm. I don't know. Nothing really. I think I fell into it pretty naturally.
Like you were it's easy just to be like playing the fucking hi-hat, doing the kick and then the snare like you just got that timing. That was just pretty natural.
I got that the first time I ever sat down on a drum set. I
Damn.
could I could play a beat, so I discovered that. That was the early days of my drumming, where that was all I was focused on. When I was young like that, I play for 4, 5, 6 hours every single day. Fortunately, my parents were super cool about it. You got to have understanding parents when you're playing drums in the house for that many hours every day. I was fortunate at that, but of course ran into the typical neighbor problems and stuff like that. But yeah, all I just practiced all the time. I just loved playing drums at that time.
So did you get involved in bands because people had heard about your drumming or did you pursue it yourself?
No, no, no. No one had heard about my drumming. I think it's funny. One of the first bands I'm in, like, I had met this kid in a local store around here. I was in there wearing a Germs shirt and my boots or something, and he was in there like with all dyed hair or something, a younger kid, and we just talked about shit to each other. And then this girl I know, or that we mutually knew, kind of told us that, like, hey, he plays drums, he plays bass, blah blah blah, and next thing you know, we met up, and yeah, that was the start of the formation of that first band, Society's Prisoners. I have a recording of some songs that we did, from back then. It's pretty damn funny, and all the shit that we were writing, and this is like 1980 or something. Some pretty funny recordings, and you hear me counting off songs, and it's like sounds like fucking Mickey Mouse, because my voice. Uh, it's all on tape. It's pretty classic, but yeah, that was the whole start of getting into the whole punk scene, and the punk scene around here was like thriving. The LA punk rock scene back then was just gnarly, dangerous. You were the outcast at school. It was not like you fit in and stuff. Everyone wanted to beat you up, especially all the jocks and stuff. That's why like the punk rockers at high school like had a little section.
I never thought about this until now. Like I've always heard about how crazy the LA scene was in the early punk days. And do you think like it's just gonna throw it out. I don't know if this is gonna make any sense, but do you think like playing in a band was kind of a safer way of going to shows instead of being in a crowd to experience it?
No.
I mean, I feel like drumming you might be a little bit more protected, but if you're up in the front, it's a
Oh,
little bit more
like when
dangerous.
you're actually playing,
When you're playing,
yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, when you're actually playing, yeah, yeah. Because you're behind the others a little bit more, than you get to avoid some of the more potential craziness that can take place. So in that aspect, yes. But as far as like just going to shows, no way. I mean, there was like there was gnarly shit happening at any given time at shows. People getting beat up, like all the different LA punk gangs that were there, and the suicidals or something, like you just look at one of those guys the wrong way and you're getting fucked up. If you're going into the pit or whatever, the pits back then were so violent, and I don't know, it was sketchy. Fucking riots going down outside, 50 cops showing up and beating everyone up, and helicopters, and it was pretty common back in the early punk scene, in the LA punk scene.
So how does this lead to, because it was Scared Straight, which led into 10 Foot Pole, Strung Out, Pulley, that was like kind of the timeline of the bands, right, for you?
Yeah, of the later bands. I mean, there was previous bands, of course, but yeah.
So, okay, so let's lead into how, like, let's kind of start with like Scared Straight, like how you get involved with that.
So with Scared Straight, I was in a band previously, The Grim, and when I exited that band, I had been kind of playing with Scared Straight. We all knew each other, kind of from the similar area, so I had known those guys forever. I think after I was fully out of The Grim, I was just kind of in Scared Straight the whole time after that. But it was kind of a seasonal band a bit, because I think that's, Scott had that baseball career going, and it was snowballing and stuff. So I always knew that, and I always knew that that the band was kind of part-time based on what he was doing. I think as it became around, I don't know, 91 maybe, things were starting to pop off a lot more with the whole punk scene and stuff again, or the whole new like fat epitaph type melodic skate punk scene or whatever. We had been playing a bunch, and it was funny because like in the early days, like Dennis and Steve, maybe more so Dennis, I don't know, it's hard to fully recall, but I remember me and Scott would always be like, those guys barely even touched their instruments. They weren't great players by any means. As things started picking up, suddenly those guys were like practicing musicians and stuff, and playing a bunch. And I don't know, I always was stoked on playing in the band, and we would do we would play gigs here and there and stuff. But eventually it came to a point where those guys started saying that I'm not a practicing drummer and that I need to practice more and blah, blah, blah. And eventually they gave me the boot. I was kind of on a couch tour for a few months in between finding a place to live or whatever. I remember them giving me the boot. I was just kind of crushed at the time, and it was over a phone call on a payphone.
Wasn't it Scott who did it?
No, it wasn't. It was Dennis, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm getting the two interviews mixed up of like who, because they talk about this and I'm forgetting who did what.
So they gave me the boot, and I remember just being fully crushed, and because that had been my band for a while. You're all ho hum, what am I going to do, blah, blah, blah. That's when, like, 3 weeks later, I went to go see NoFX at one of the famous clubs here in the Valley, the Reseda Country Club. And it was, I think, NoFX, Lagwagon. I don't like the other band, so I ain't fucking giving them a shout out.
I'm guessing it was Guttermouth.
No, I love Guttermouth. That's fucking great. And Strung Out. I remember seeing them play that night, and I just thought they were terrible. And the sound wasn't very good or nothing. But that's the night that Jim Cherry approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in playing. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. He gave me a demo tape of the stuff that they were doing, and I'm like, holy shit, this sounds sick. I could do some awesome stuff with this. He told me that they've been talking to Fat Mike, who I'd known all the NoFX guys since like 84, 85. And I knew that, the Fat record label thing was about to take off and Mike was signing bands. So they were signed to Fat Records or just about to be signed. They were looking for a drummer. I ended up practicing with them 6 times, and bam, we hit West Beach Studios and did that first record. And it happened really quick. I felt like the musicianship of those guys made me have to step my game up to the playing. I think at that time, we all found that I think they felt like they found the drummer that is going to be proper for what they're doing. And I'm like, these guys rip, all the musicianship, we were pushing ourselves and we busted out that first album. Yeah, that was the start of Strung Out for me.
When that came out, so that's Another Day in Paradise, right? Are you talking about?
Right.
So when that comes out, like, how quickly did you guys notice that you gained, like, your following started to grow?
Pretty quick, because at that time, if you were a Fat Records band, it didn't matter who you were. People started gaining interest, just because of the label. Lagwagon, Propaghandi, I think Face to Face, had already put records out as well as NoFX. We were already getting on that whole the bandwagon of being a Fat band. And then I think one of our first tours ever was Europe with NoFX. So here we go. We're going on tour with NoFX in Europe. So we started making fans over there. Yeah, it just kind of started snowballing from there a bit.
So when that starts, though, like, because you, like you said, NoFX, Lagwagon, all these releases are out. We got Propaghandi. Like, when people see a newer band getting on the label, did they kind of like sit there with their arms folded, kind of like, okay, you have to earn this, or do they just open arms, like, because you're on this label, we just fucking accept you?
Nope, definitely a lot of crossed arms. A lot, but I think that's I think it's standard with a lot of bands, a lot of new bands. Like you're going to listen, but I always felt like the decider of whether we did or didn't win people over was how many CDs we sold at the show and merchandise and stuff. More so music, because remember that's the era of CDs and no free music. If you sold like a lot of CDs, even if you didn't get a bunch of movement in the pit or people moving around, people always applauded, especially in Europe. Everyone was like really, really cool, in Europe, different crowd and stuff. But if you sold a shitload of CDs, you're like, well, they must have fucking liked it, and now they're checking it out, and that's the start of the build.
What's it look like for you? Because I'm on Discogs, I'm going through the releases, and I mean, it's saying it's in order. So, you're seeing all of these releases come out after you guys. So you guys are like a handful of releases in. People are already loving the previous ones, and you guys. And then all these bands coming in after these labels. Like, did you look at that as exciting and it upped your guys' game, or did you guys have any kind of like, oh, what the fuck are these bands? I don't know. Was there any competition with them, like, kind of internally?
I don't think so. I mean,
Or were you just excited? You're like, wow, this is so cool. This roster is just kicking out.
yeah, I mean, when you start connecting on the bands and the different music they're doing, or, we're listening to Propaghandi and Lagwagon and shit, and going like, holy shit, this fucking rips, and listening to their musicianship, or like me listening to Derek's drumming and Lagwagon, and us having, per se, friendly, not competition, but, you want to push each other. A lot of people back then were comparing our drumming and stuff, so it was really interesting because I would like listen to his playing and listen to things that I wanted to try and rip off a little bit, and develop into my own style. And so I think there was like the push and the excitement of all the different new music that was being created and watching, these bands grow. And I think like NoFX and Pennywise were like the big bands back then, and they were on Epitaph, and I think they were selling like 70, 80,000 albums, and everyone was just freaking, right? Holy shit, like selling that many albums. Obviously that would go on to, I think NoFX has sold like 8 million albums, or something like that. Pennywise, I'm sure, is in the millions and stuff. And what we went on to do, and what we sold collectively was like, I don't know, it was mind-boggling. But I think in our first year, or the first 6 months of our album being out, it was like 24, 25,000, and you're just tripping on it. This whole scene is like building, and it's growing fast, and all these different bands are coming out, and I don't think there was any jealousy or anything. I mean, sometimes you would watch one band that is going way bigger. You don't have the necessary answers of why these bands just take off, and yours doesn't so much, or whatever.
How often did you guys play with Propaghandi in that time period, in like the early 90s?
Strung Out, never played with Propaghandi.
Oh, really?
Nope, I don't think once.
Man, I was gonna say, I wonder what those. Did you ever get to meet them at all back then?
I met them a lot. I mean, the story goes they stayed at my house when they recorded the first album. Fat Mike brought them to my house. They stayed here the night before they went to go record at West Beach. Yeah, and that's how I initially met all the Propaghandi guys. I was friendly with them and continue to be. I mean, obviously we don't see each other often or whatever, but yeah, I would constantly try to make shows happen or a tour happen with them. It just never worked out. So the only band that I played with that played with Propaghandi was Pulley. We did Canadian shows with them.
Were they? This is the question I was gonna ask it just because it's the obvious one. When they're hanging out with you, because they're such a political band, is that like in the mix of conversation, or does that just not come up when they're hanging out and just dicking around?
Not that I recall. I mean, they were all pretty laid back, and Chris was always super cool, just a fucking incredible ripping guitar player. I mean, being able to play guitar like that and sing over it, and Jord had just such a unique style on the drums, and sometimes I feel like he's like really underrated because he's a complete badass on the drum set. It's really interesting when you find people with all their unique styles, and their little fills and stuff, and the different way that they can play and stuff. So sometimes it's hard to like copy other people's style, because it's just so unique, and it's so unique to their personality. But as far as politics and shit coming up, no. I mean, George loved smoking weed, so we'd hang out and smoke weed. I mean, Chris would be doing crazy weird shit, or sticking a drumstick up his butt or something, or I don't know. They were fun to hang out with, and it's cool because each time they've come to, on the rare times that they come to town, I'll go see them and hang out, and we're friendly. It's not like we're best friends or something, but we're all good.
So what's like your life look like for you at this point for the next 3 years? A couple years leading up to Suburban Teenage Wasteland Blues. Like you guys are just on the road constantly.
Pretty much, yeah. Just doing different tours and stuff, and I don't know who did we tour with back then. I mean, touring with like Lagwagon. We did like a 6-week run with them, which was just fucking out of control. And Canada, we did Europe with Lagwagon, and yeah, some crazy times. Different like partying levels back then, and
I was gonna say, like, what were you guys like on the road? Like, did you guys? Because I mean, I've heard stories about Fletcher just being wild on the road, and then
yeah, we were definitely no Fletchers. Fletcher's a complete other level of gnarliness. So no, I think we had a shitload of good times. You're going and traveling to all these places and meeting all these people and playing shows, and I don't know, it was A lot of good times. Partying, getting fucked up, you know, meeting chicks, the whole deal. It's like,
I guess at this point, you're probably looking back to like the Scared Straight days and stuff, and you're kind of like, oh, that actually don't really, that actually.
well, yeah, that totally panned out because they kicked me out of that band, and that was right when they decided we need to change the name because Scared Straight sounds like a straight edge band, and we don't want to be pinned as a straight edge band, so we're going to change our name to 10-Foot Pole. I remember when they did that, I was just like, what the fuck? The band's been Scared Straight forever. Why change it? But they were just worried about being pigeonholed into the straight edge movement. I thought it was dumb. I guess it worked out for them or whatever, but Strung Out took off and did better, than 10-Foot Pole at that time, I think, or whatever. I always felt like that worked out for me because I got into Strung Out and they put the album out, 10-Foot Pole, Rev. That was with Tony on drums. Tony took my place in 10-Foot Pole, and then Tony took my place in Pulley.
Is he in Papa Roach now? Is that the guy?
He's in Papa Roach. Yeah, he's a great guy. He's a great drummer.
Real quick, if you're looking for an explainer video or someone to do motion graphics for your company, check out my company, drive80.com, and you can email me at mike@drive80.com for more info. That's all I got to say. So now back to the interview. From what I've heard from interviews, you and Jim like had creative differences, or you guys like would butt heads behind the scenes, or did that not happen?
Lots. Yeah, lots. But musically, we clicked, because he was a really talented songwriter. He was an artist, and I think artists are all fucking weird.
Yeah.
It's part of the creativity, I guess. I always say this, my stupid little saying is like, if you're in a band, we're all fucked up in some shape, form, or fashion. It's just such a different lifestyle, but I think the ones that are like the songwriters and have that really super creative brain and to create the lyrics and everything that come up with, it's a different mindset to me. So Jim was just, I don't know, very, very interesting. And we butted heads all the fucking time. And he butted heads with the other guys as well. It eventually came to a point after Twisted by Design where everyone kind of agreed we needed to give him the boot.
Did you find like you guys had similar personalities and that was the issue, or was he just more?
Fuck no, not even close.
What was his personality like? Because I've heard people that said, like I've interviewed a bunch of people and they said they met him and they're like he was just an intimidating guy from the start, and then you got to know him and he was great.
I think he wanted to be intimidating. I mean, everyone would kind of compare him to Fletcher or whatever, but he was so not Fletcher. I mean, I think he kind of wanted to have that persona sometimes, but he was definitely he was like the full-on awkward, gentle giant, I guess. I think he had a good heart. He was a good person in general, but just like super awkward in being social. I think you can hear that in some of his lyrics as well. But I don't know. We were just always on bad ones. And I think also one of the things when I came into the band, I knew tons of people already, and I had all these different connections, and he was used to being the guy in the band. I mean, I think no one in the band, I don't even know if they had their own equipment. All the equipment was owned by Jim, I think. Like Rob didn't have a guitar or a guitar amp, I don't think. I think Jim owned it. And so whatever, Jim was the controller of the band, and when I came in, I started doing a lot of things. Not that I was like trying to take control of the band, but I just had different connections, with getting stuff done for us and, knowing Fatty in the Fat Records. I got us our first booking agent. I just started working, the business end of things a lot, and maybe we started butting heads on some of that. I don't know.
When you started playing in bands and like the Scared Straight days, did you decide like this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
I don't know. I don't think so. Because
Well, just like that's like what you wanted to do professionally for a while, I guess.
yeah, but I never even thought of it as professionally. I mean, I was just a punk rocker growing up in punk bands, and you freak out the day you make $100, and get a pizza. You're like, what the fuck? We got pizza. It's like,
Yeah.
like you're stoked on that. I mean, you're at the grassroots and you're doing it for, because you just love music and that's what you're doing. I don't think I ever had a focus of like, I'm going to make millions. I think there's a lot of younger bands that came up that had the focus of, we're going to be the biggest band ever. And we're going to make money and this is what we're going to do. And I don't think I ever had that thought process.
I guess like the way I'm trying to, I think I worded it wrong. It's because you were saying you stepped into the band and started you'd get the manager, you think. So it's like when you're doing things like that, you have a forward you're thinking forward in a forward motion in a sense. So that causes like, oh, I want this to go somewhere and I want this to keep happening.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I'm doing everything I can to try and further the band, help out with getting shows and connections, and everything's about connections and who you connect with and who you can connect with different bands and stuff and make friendships and get invited onto different tours or gigs. And you want your booking agent to handle a lot of that, but it was a lot of the relations that you build and stuff that are outside of that. And yeah, it's just helpful in growing the band, I guess.
Outside of the whole gym relationship, like the rest of you guys, like what were you guys like relationship wise in the band?
I think for the most part, I got along with the guys and stuff, but it's no secret that I didn't really get along too well with, the singer. Just didn't really ever develop too much of, if any, friendship with him, or not that I felt at least. Eventually, there would be a ton of butting heads with him, yeah, which would lead to me getting out of the band, I suppose, or being fired.
In 2018.
That would be correct.
Going back before we get there, does that, I mean, that's a long fucking time. Is it like, was it just daunting for a long time because you just were butting heads and stuff like that? Or did you just kind of, it's just part of it?
Yeah, it was pretty fucking miserable at times. Absolutely. But I always told myself that I don't want to quit, or that I'm not going to quit for a few different reasons. It definitely became miserable at lots of different points. And I'm not going to sit here and talk about all the fucking different dramas that happened
Yeah, that's
and,
fine.
the back and forth bullshit and stuff. But, just in a nutshell, I mean, it was like Jim again, but worse. We definitely butted heads on a lot of different business stuff. All I did was I was always just trying to do the best I could for the band and make shit happen. So, but yeah, I don't want to go into much drama.
Yeah, that's totally fine. When Jim Lee, well, you guys kicked Jim out, the next couple albums, like, what were your thoughts on where the songwriting was going? Because he was doing like the majority of the songs, the songwriting, right?
People think that, but I wouldn't say he was doing the majority. That's why when it came to like Twisted by Design, it threw a little wrench into things because all of a sudden he wanted 100% of his publishing for his songs. Everyone's just like, what? Like we have been equal for the first two albums, and then he wanted 100% of his songs, and I think he really got into Jason's ear about like you need to take all your publishing for the lyrics and blah blah blah. And that was the first album, and actually the only album. that we weren't an equal split on. So he took 100% of his 5 songs, and then the rest was left to split in different percentages. And when the checks start rolling in, it's like everyone starts looking at the royalties going like, what the fuck? That was just another thing that created another bad vibe within all the friction and stuff within in the band. So that was another thing that didn't help things. But, when we booted him, we had this other guy for a hot second, that played a couple shows with us and recorded on that. I think he did the 30-second song and the Police cover song with us. Just realized he was not the right fit. And at that time, Chris had been pretty much begging to jam. He would come over here, end up jamming with me. And I don't know, from what I recall, I had a first hand in bringing him into the band.
He's still the bass player, right?
No, not anymore. I mean, he was, but evidently now he's the guitar player because Jake Kiley's out of the band.
Oh, Jake's out of the band now too?
So late breaking news, right?
Oh, shit. Wait, is this something that's known?
Well, I don't think it's secret. I think it's out there. I don't think they've made any official statement. Not that I wanted this to be the official statement, because it's not. I mean, it's just hearsay and what I know and what I've seen online and stuff. And, we're jumping ahead here, but me and Jake are exchanging Instagram messages now, so we're back on some sort of friendly course. But I never had a problem with him either.
With Jake?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw on your Instagram he had you wished him happy birthday in April or something, and it was a picture of the two of you guys.
Yeah. So whatever. That sidetracked me. What were we saying? Yeah, Chris. So he came into the band, and that's when we did the Element songwriting. I guess changed a little bit, but that was just another step forward in the music that we were making.
How do you get involved with Pulley? Because you're doing double duty at this point when you join Pulley, right?
Yeah, so how I got involved with Pulley was going back to how I got kicked out of 10-foot pole and the way it happened and everything that was going down. So again, the punk scene was thriving again. The whole Epitaph Fat scene was pumping. 10-foot pole had put that record out. Well, those guys decide in 10-foot pole that they're going to kick Scott out of the band, which I guess you've heard that story. Now, the reasoning behind that in my head is they wanted to play more, and Scott was traveling and doing the baseball thing. What they should have done is started their own band and let Scott keep his band. I mean, I don't know. Those guys all started it together, but what happened was they kicked Scott out of the band. Scott was pretty blown away, I believe, and pissed off. And as you can tell, he still has not made or will not make amends with Dennis. I think he pretty much was fairly vocal about that.
Yeah, he talks about that in the interview. I don't think he didn't really talk any shit, but he was just kind of yeah, just kind of just whatever.
Yeah. So I won't elaborate on that. So basically what happened was I was kind of sitting behind the scenes going, ha, 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 same shit happened to you that happened to me. Now they kicked you out of the band. Scott wasn't done with music. He's always thrived on music and the punk scene and just always been way into it. And he never had a thought about his baseball career fucking with his whole music career thing. So that's when he decided he wanted to put a band together. And I think, maybe Jim might have been the first one he contacted, or probably Mike, whatever order it went in. It was, contacting me, Mike, Jim, and then we got Matt also. That turned into Pulley. So we started writing, and I was fully into it. It was cool to be in another band. It was just kind of weird to be in another band with Jim.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, weren't you kind of skeptical a little bit about doing that, putting yourself in that position again?
Yeah, but again, like he was writing songs and the music that we were doing and stuff, it was just all kind of clicking. You put a bunch of that type of shit aside, and then we knew that we were going to get signed to Epitaph, and I knew for me like it was a chance for me to try and play some different, to try and separate my drumming a little bit, like my style, to try and do my best to give it a little bit of separation from the Strung Out style, and try and get creative with what I was going to play on those albums. Yeah, it was a really good time. And then, of course, like for me, playing with Matt Riddle was just awesome because he was one of my favorite bass players, and I think as a rhythm section, we really clicked very well. The songs were coming together, and I had known Scott and Mike Carter since early days, 84, 85, whatever, and here we are. We got this other band together, and it was just really interesting listening to Scott tell me all the stuff, like, yeah, they did this, they did that, and I'm like, yeah, here goes. You've got all the same emotions and feelings that I had when I got booted out of Scared Straight Tempo Pull. I can listen and relate to all the stuff that you're telling me. Yeah, that first album came out. It got a lot of attention. It obviously got billed as like this little, all-star lineup. They were plugging it with, featuring Jim and Jordan from Strung Out, Matt Riddle from No Use for a Name, or I don't know, or was he in No Use for a Name yet? From Face to Face.
I think he went to No Use for a Name after.
He went to No Use after. That's when he left Pulley. He only did the first record, so he went to No Use. And then when we did that second record, we just did it as the four of us. It was just me, Jim, Mike, and Scott. And Jim played all the bass. So there was only four members in Pulley at the time that we did the 60 cycle hum record. And then Tyler came into the picture.
So when I interviewed Wendy, she told a story that like you guys got back from tour and like what was the Pulley van called?
The Manners Mobile?
That was it. Yeah. And she's like, he came out, or he came out with like a black eye or something. And she's like, what happened? She's like, oh, we just worked it out in the van or something. Do you remember this story? It was like you and him got after it in the van, or like it had just like it heated or something. And she's like, yeah, that's just. He was like, yeah, we worked it out, or that's how we work it out or something. So I just wanted to bring that up because it was said before.
Um, I mean, there was some incidents like that. I don't know if I thought that was more Strung Out. I can't remember if that was in Pulley. In Pulley, what I do remember, I don't know if she wants me to tell this story, but it was basically towards the end of Pulley where I had enough. Like basically, we kicked Jim out of the band, out of Strung Out on like a Monday, and I had band practice with him in Pulley on a Wednesday with a show on a Friday. So yeah, talk about some weird shit. So you just kick this guy out of the band, but you're in another band with him. And I know he was very resentful because I think he pretty much started Strung Out. So yeah, there was definitely some weird vibes that were going down, but we ended up doing a tour in Europe with Pulley, and that was like it was like Blink 182, Pulley, and Lagwagon. I don't even know if they were 182 yet. They might have been. They just dropped that single, and they were getting super hot. They actually left that tour and flew back home because shit was starting to fire off in the U.S. for them. But we did that tour, and we were on our bus, and there were so many times where I was stuck in the bus late night with Jim, getting drilled on, like why is he out of the band and this, and you're on the tour bus, so it's like there's not much escape. So I remember like a lot of those times, but jump ahead, we did that tour and it was great, and at some time and point, we played the Showcase Theater in Corona. I'm sitting there watching the opening band, or one of the opening bands, and somebody comes up behind me. This girl comes up behind me and pulls my hat off my head and looks at me, holds the hat in front of me, spits in it, throws it on the ground, stomps on it, and runs away. And I'm like, what the fuck? What was that? So I run after her. She runs outside. I'm screaming at her, what the fuck's going on? And all of a sudden she started throwing some high kicks on me and stuff, and which I later found out she was like some like gnarly black belt kickboxer or something, and like, that probably would have completely fucked me up. But it was Wendy's best friend. And they were like giving me a bunch of shit, and of course we had to play on stage that night and stuff. And that was when I came to the point where it was that and this other scenario that led me to saying I've got to quit this band. And the other scenario was Jim and Wendy were trying to sue us to try to sue Moto XXX for using Ultimate Devotion in our video, which we pulled out of the video and replaced it with Buck Wild, which was Dewey from Lagwagon's band. So there was that going on, and then this whole scenario that happened at the Showcase Theater, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I can't be in a band with this guy. I told Scott and the guys, and I'm like, look, it's either him or me. And they chose him, I think, because he was a songwriter, and also because he didn't have another band and I did. I believe those to be the reasons, and that's when they got Tony, and Tony quit 10-Foot Pole and joined Pulley. So just funny how it all works out, and I was like really bummed because I really liked, the music in Pulley, and we had done, I guess we had done 3 albums at that time. Yeah, I was like really bummed. I don't know how many months later, Jim decides to quit Pulley and do Zero Down. Yeah, and it was only like 7 months later or something like that. I'm like, fuck, man, like I'd still be in the band if he wasn't in it. So I wanted to be back in it, the whole time. And then, I don't know, they went through like 5 different drummers or something. Because after Tony left, Tony ended up leaving for Unwritten Law, I think. And then they got another drummer. I don't know. But the whole time, I had always wanted to be back in Pulley. Because the only reason I left Pulley was Jim. Besides that, the music that we made and everything was awesome, and we had good times and stuff. But never got invited to be back in the band. Why? That's the whole thing that I've always been puzzled with till this day. Is why? Like, why have I never been invited back?
I felt like in Scott's interview, he said that he mentioned you in like high regard. It seemed like.
It's funny because he mentioned me, and I listened to one of the things that he said, and one of the things that he said was like, "Oh, I know Jordan would die to be back in this band," and I'm like, "What the fuck, man?" Like,
that's what I was gonna bring up. He said people who left this band and would like to be back in it. He's like, so it seems he was basically saying like it's all been on good terms. He goes when it was comparing it to 10-Foot Pole, is like anyone who left that band wouldn't go back in the band. So I think that's what he was saying.
Right. Yeah. So he talked about the different drummers and stuff, and I thought he didn't make too much mention of me, but the whole time I have told those guys, everyone in the band, that I want to be back in the band. I want to be back in the band. You guys practice fucking 6 miles from my house, like I want to be in the band. Like, oh no, we got, they ended up getting like Chris Daly, who lives 2 hours away. He was in the band for a while, and I'm like, all right, whatever. And then they got Metal Bob in the band, and that didn't last. And they've had all these different people go through, and And while they're making the different albums. And honestly, I still don't know to this day the honest, real deal answer of why. And that's a bit frustrating to me because I've known Scott and Mike since like 84, 85. So I wish I would just get the straight shot, like, we don't like you, or whatever the fuck it is.
Maybe they'll hear this and give you a call. Just be like, oh, you want to come and play?
I mean, look, at this time of point, I'm pretty damn over it. Although, Pulley would have been a great choice for me to be in after the exit of Strung Out. It'd be great. It's like a part-time band, go play shows, go have fun, hang out with everyone, do some traveling, continue to go to rad places. It would have been cool. It's obviously, it's not going to happen, and whatever. I've made a couple smart-ass comments, I guess, on their Instagram. I don't need to say what the comments were or whatever, but just some smart ass shit, joking around, poking fun, more or less, and was taken seriously. And whoever runs that page blocked me, and I just laughed. I don't know what the scoop is, but I do know this. I know that the 3 records that I did with Pulley, I fucking love them all. I love the music that we created. I'm proud of all my drumming that I did on those records. Yeah, everything that we made together. I mean, there's even some songs that there's a song on the 60 Cycle Hum album that me and Jim Cherry, I'm doing a harmony to Jim, like singing some vocals and stuff, and I'll listen back on that and just think about the interesting times we had with like creating some of that music and stuff, and listening to our 2 voices singing together, for instance, and just there was a lot of good times, and there was a shitload of good times on that Europe tour, by the way. We did have plenty of good times together, and I really believe that the music that we made was pretty awesome too.
That was Pulley we were talking about?
Yeah.
So do you think like when you're playing in Pulley, kind of like wrap it back or pull it back a bit, when you're playing in Pulley and Strung Out, and you were saying like, you would butt heads with the singer Strung Out, do you think like having the double duty gave you more longevity with wanting to stay with Strung Out? Because like you would break up the time with, of hanging around those guys?
No, I think that's irrelevant pretty much. I mean, I don't see any relevancy between that really. I sometimes feel like there was maybe, and this could relate to the whole current situation with Strung Out too, but I always felt back then there was that bit of, I don't know if jealousy would be the right word or whatever, or resentment that I'm in both of these bands and not like focusing my 100% attention on Strung Out. I did sometimes feel that, but there were so many times where there was a few times where we toured together and I was doing double duty. I thought it was great back then because it was like Pulley was like a warm up for me for the Strung Out set. I'd play the Pulley set, and so I was doing a lot of drumming, which I was super stoked on, and you got to keep up your stamina and everything to perform 2 sets, and I just thought that was fun and good times and stuff, but. I don't know. I feel like there was that resentment a little bit back then from those guys that you're in both bands. And I think that happened currently with, Jake being in Me First and the Gimme Gimmes too. I don't know. This is my own perspective. There was the resentment of him being it because now he was in a bigger band and they're doing bigger things. And I always thought that playing in Pulley was just a really good time. I thoroughly enjoyed all the time that I was in there for the 3 albums that we did and touring. Like I said, I would pester those guys all the time about, I want to be back in the band. And just always felt like each guy was passing the buck. I don't know, just never got a real answer. And now, ever since I got blocked, I just haven't heard anything from those guys.
So which band? It sounds like you liked being in Pulley better than Strung Out.
I'd say it was I'd say it was pretty equal. You have to I think you have to relate it right back to, or I have to relate it right back to the music. It's the number one thing of why you're doing it. It's like the music that you create, and I think I've focused more on that with like a bunch of the new music that I am writing with my friend Eric, and Eric used to play in Poor Habit. We've put together like 30 songs over the last year and a half or something, and it's so funny because it just really takes you back to the roots of why you played music. You played music and you played your instrument because it's something you love to do. With being in a band and growing, and the band turns into business and you're making a living, and everything that goes along with that, you lose sight of like why it all started, and how it all started. And me jamming with Eric, like it really brings it back to the roots of playing music, and it's just you're just having a good time and creating and making music again with it's just stress free.
What was the last album you recorded with Strung Out?
Last album with them was the Transmission Alpha Delta, which to me, I've said it many times, is our 100% best sounding production album, and the songs are just all killer, and everything about that album was great. Everything about making that album was a nightmare, but it falls under no pain, no gain, is the way I think about it. But it was a nightmare making that album.
Just from like production standpoint, or just
Production, creative stance, the time factors, being in the studio, just everything of how it went down. It was craziness. Kyle and Rob. When I did all my stuff, it was just with Kyle and Rob, and yeah, it was just insanity. Like, no, you need to do this. No, you need to do that. No, we're gonna do this. We're change the beat. Meanwhile, you got a cowbell going in your ear for a click track for 10 hours in a day, and it's it's just it was gnarly doing it. But Ryan Green was there. We did it in his studio, and he was credited as mental counselor if you read the credits on there. But he wasn't doing the controls. But like there was a lot of times where he'd come in and be like, dude, that is not a Jordan beat, or that is not a Jordan fill. Like anyone can do that. You need to think of something else. And you're just like, fuck. Like you want to tell everyone to fuck off. Or Kyle going like, no, I want you to hear you go, dead, crash, dead, crash, 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 dead, crash, crash. And you're like, if I hear you say crash one more time, I'm going to fucking strangle you. Like just the tensions of everything in there. But that's it's just part of the way that you push to get the product. And when you listen back on the product that we made and created, I think it's just awesome. I'm really proud of that album. I'm proud of all the albums, but like the drum sound on that album, and the way that you could clearly hear all of the instruments, the vocals, the vocal melodies, the lyrics, everything. I think we were top notch on that, and it's always hard to outdo yourself, with an album, and especially like later in your career. You know how like everyone goes, oh, I like their old stuff with all bands, and so to outdo yourself each time, it's a super challenge to pull it off. And when that album came out, we just had so much positive feedback from it. It felt really good.
yeah, I was gonna point out the last album I really listened to of you guys. I mean, I listened to some of the newer stuff, but Agents of the Underground was like my favorite. And I remember when that came out, I was married at the time, and my brother-in-law, he's working for a record label. and he put Fever in the Sound on this compilation he would do every year for Christmas to this thing, and I was like, what is this? He's like, this is the new Strung Out. I was like, holy shit, man. Because like, you're right. Like, I mean, I'm a person who really listens to older stuff, and after a while, by like album 5, I'm typically like, eh. But and I saw that, and I saw like just the a bunch of songs you guys had in between. I was like, that's rare. Just like you're saying, it's rare that the later ones come out, and you're like, wow, this really like fucking this kept it up.
Yeah, and I mean, shit, it's rewarding. It's definitely rewarding to achieve something like that. Like I said, you always want to be proud of the albums, and when you put music out, every band goes, "This is the best we've ever done," because that's what you want to believe. But it's the fans that get to decide if it is or isn't. Like your best work. That I really believe was definitely some of our best work. The songwriting on there, and it just came out sick. And Kyle did such a great job with the production. It's like, it blows my mind that they never used Kyle again for the 2 albums that they've done now without me being in the band. And I think it's, the last 2 albums they've done, production wise, does not hold a candle to Transmission. Yeah, I don't know.
What was the final like leaving the band? Was it just like kind of a text or a phone call? Or did you guys like have a face to face?
No, the final was, and I didn't really know it was coming. It was December 31st. We played the last show, or that was my last show with Pennywise. It was a New Year's Eve show. I guess I won't name any names, but after that show, a friend of mine had told me that he heard from somebody else that I'm going to get kicked out of the band. With all the information that he was able to tell me, I'm like, oh, fuck, this is for real. So I kind of got a heads up because those guys were running their mouths telling some people that I was getting the boot. So I actually had a heads up on it, which really helped for me for having it sink in. That's basically how I found out. So I remember at one point they were texting me going like, "Hey, we're having a band meeting," and I'm like, "Oh shit," they're being like, "We're having it on this date," and I'm like, "Oh shit, I can't make that date." Just kept on stringing it along because I knew what the band meeting was about. So they'd be like, "Well, okay, well, when can you make it?" "Oh, I don't know. I'll let you know." Like, remember like Chris sending me messages going, "Mandatory band meeting," and I'm like, "Yeah, right. I already know what this meeting's about. I'm not going to sit there and put myself in that position to get beat up on." And I already knew it was going to go down. And I think I had wrote to them. I had been speaking with a lawyer already, was advised on some things, and I just wrote back to him. I think saying something like, "I already know what's up, and I don't need to sit down with you guys for you to fire me," and blah 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 blah. That's pretty much how it went down, with them like telling me like I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to get my shit out of the practice studio, and blah blah blah. And and then these fucking shitty ass rumors came out, which I think was quite slandering to me, and fucking really unfair and untrue. I've never really spoke about it, never really aired the dirty laundry or whatever, but I think it's kind of frustrating for me that these shitty ass fucking rumors came out that I do believe, damaged me and my reputation a little bit. I've never really talked about it and taken a stand on it, and I don't know. I don't think I'm really going to further than what I'm saying right now. Those that know the rumors that I'm talking about, and it's just bullshit. And I don't know. I think one day, I don't know when, the time will or won't be right, or if I even need to say anything. But one day I feel like I need to open my mouth and kind of defend myself on on the reasoning of why they fired me and that they basically put out there and told the people. And yeah, and you know, with the internet, that shit spreads pretty much like wildfire. Just kind of frustrating on that, but aside from that, I was definitely not bummed or depressed or anything about being out of that band. The only thing I was bummed about was like not being back in Pulley. You know, Pulley would have been a perfect band for me to continue to be in. But it's all good. You know, I'm doing my thing and life is good and I play drums and have fun and go and do my Moto XXX business. Everything's great. It'll be almost 7 years that I'm out of Strung Out. Shit, I don't know how many years. Probably what? Good. It's probably 20 years since I've been in Pulley or something.
Have any bands reached out to you from that fat crowd or anything that was like, hey, like you want to come and play for us?
Yeah. I don't know if I should talk about that. Maybe I can talk about it without naming names, but I almost feel like just fucking throwing them under the bus, anyways. But I had a band that was coming out of the woodworks that hadn't been together in a long time. It was going to be great. I was gonna decide to play with them, and we were working on music and going back and forth for 3 months and talking about getting together to jam and blah blah blah. And the whole COVID thing was happening. You know, I'm just gonna leave it at that. COVID fucked it all up. That whole thing fell apart, and I think they ended up getting a drummer from Craigslist or something. They're they're playing some shows or whatever, but I don't think I'm missing out too much.
If a band other than Pulley came back and asked you to play for them that had like that, that status like of touring for so many years, like, Strung Out and Pulley and NoFX and all these bands, like, would you say yeah, or do you kind of like, yeah, I'm good for now?
I'm leaning more towards I'm good for now, you know, because like, you know, I haven't like per se put myself out there. You know, some people say like, well, if you want to get another band, you need to like really put yourself out there and show that you're playing and doing this and putting all the work in and blah blah blah. And it's like, I don't know. Sometimes I think back that I toured for 25 years. I played incredible shows. We made incredible music together. I met awesome people. I traveled the world, got to see so many different things. So I like to focus back on that. I had an amazing run. It was all badass. At this stage of my life, do I need to go back to that again? Sometimes I miss some things. Like I miss traveling to awesome places, you know, like Japan or Australia or, you know, cool places in Canada like Montreal or cool spots in the US. And so some of that aspect I miss, but I'm good.
Before I wrap this up, is there a story you'd like to tell that you've never told in an interview before that you'd like to tell now?
No, because I would just probably be talking shit of some sort.
I mean, it could be a fun story. I always tell people this. It doesn't have to be incriminating. It could be like, oh, this is like a cool story, or this is like a fun thing. It doesn't have to be negative.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head at the moment.
All right, man. So I'm gonna wrap this up. Before I ask the last question, what would you like to plug? It could be about you. It could be about a friend or a cause. It could be about both.
What would I like to plug? I don't know. Well, we already started off with my brand, Moto XXX. So it's MotoXXX.com. MotoXXX.com is the website. Moto XXX official is Instagram. You know, that's the two spots for our socials, or Facebook, I guess, is Moto XXX. So yeah, so that, you know, I guess plugging that, and I already mentioned that me and Eric are making music, and we don't have a singer, which is the saying goes, it's a problem finding a singer and then the singer becomes the problem. Will I find a singer? I hope so, because we have a lot of really cool fucking music that I like a lot, and that I've been writing, and it's like a lot of my riffs. Of course, Eric is contributing to. We're collaborating and putting stuff together, and I hope that that just doesn't get thrown away. But if you have a shitty singer over the best music ever, you just have shitty music. It's a challenge to find a singer. So one day, hopefully, that you can follow my Instagram, of course. It's just Jordan Burns 178. Look through some stuff on there if you're interested.
If you could wave a magic wand, what would the singer's voice sound like?
A cross between Ozzy, Volbeat, and the Lillingtons.
I was not expecting that to be the answer.
I want like a really like good melodic singing voice. The music that I've been writing is like really, it's like very simplified and back to basic roots, which leaves plenty of space for vocal melody. So I think it's like really important to have something melodic. My whole stupid joke with looking for a singer is no beards, because I don't want beard rock.
Okay. So I think some people out there have something to work with too.
But I don't want that rough hardcore sound or the scratchy rough vocal. I'm just looking for something like really, really cool and melodic.
All right, man. Last question. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
Oh God, none. I don't know. I mean, I grew up through the whole like, punk rock scene and stuff, and everything changed, and punk rock is so different today than what it was in per se the early '80s. But I guess it's just do your own thing, be who you want to be, and don't give a fuck about other shit. Be yourself.